Welcome to Adorable Skull, where true history meets terrifying hauntings. If you love eerie tales soaked in real history, subscribe and follow us as we travel deep into the Canadian wilderness. Today we take you to CarCross, Yukon, a remote place where beauty hides stories long buried, and some that still walk among us. CarCross, short for Caribou Crossing, is a tiny village tucked between Bennett and Nares Lakes in Yukon. It was once a gold rush stopover in the late 1800s and home to the Tagish and Tlingit First Nations, whose deep spiritual traditions shape the region's identity. Once a hub of steamships, traders, and pioneers, CarCross today seems like a sleepy tourist town, but its past is carved into the soil. Beneath the charm of its heritage buildings and colorful cabins, something lingers, something old. Bessie Gideon and Polly the parrot. In the heart of CarCross stands the Caribou Hotel, a 3-story wooden structure steeped in history and shrouded in mystery. Among its most enduring legends is that of Bessie Gideon, who, alongside her husband Edwin, managed the hotel in the early 1900s. Following Edwin's death in 1925, Bessie continued to run the establishment until her own passing within its walls on October 27, 1933. Since then, guests and staff have reported unexplained phenomena. Doors slamming shut, floorboards creaking under invisible footsteps, and the apparition of a woman gazing out from the third-floor window. Some believe Bessie's spirit remains, a vigilant guardian of the hotel she cherished. Adding to the hotel's eerie ambiance is the tale of Polly, a yellow-naped Amazon parrot. Originally owned by Captain James Alexander, Polly was left in the care of the Gideons in 1918, when Alexander perished in the sinking of the SS Princess Sophia. Polly became a fixture at the hotel, known for singing opera tunes, mimicking guests, and even indulging in whiskey. Living to the remarkable age of 125, Polly passed away in 1972 and was buried in the CarCross Cemetery. Visitors have claimed to hear phantom squawks and disembodied voices echoing through the halls, leading some to believe that Polly's spirited presence lingers alongside Bessie's. Montana Mountain. Montana Mountain rises dramatically above CarCross, standing as both a natural wonder and a spiritual stronghold for the CarCross Tagish First Nation. Long before miners carved paths across its slopes during the silver boom of the early 1900s, the mountain was sacred ground. Locals still tell of eerie lights dancing across the upper ridgelines long after dark. These aren't northern lights. They move low, as if carried by hands. Visitors describe overwhelming feelings of being watched, a weight pressing on their chest, especially near the abandoned tram lines. Some hikers report encounters with skywalkers, tall figures robed in shadows, glimpsed between the trees or at the edges of vision, always silent, always out of reach. The wind carries whispers in a language no longer spoken, and sometimes, if you stand still enough, you'll feel something pass through you, like air shifting through a different time. Those who stray off trail often speak of loops in time, paths that bring them back to the same spot again and again, as if the mountain is folding in on itself. Some emerge shaken, some weeping, unable to explain what they saw or what saw them. Spirit Lake, the whisper beneath the water. Located just south of CarCross, Spirit Lake is famed for its swirling emerald green waters and hauntingly beautiful crater-like formations carved by ancient glaciers. Early settlers began calling it Spirit Lake after a string of unexplained disappearances in the 1800s. Trappers, prospectors and travelers vanished along its shores, often leaving behind only their horses or empty camps. Even today, people speak of a cold presence that radiates from the lake, even on warm days. Hikers report hearing faint humming, soft, melodic, and impossible to trace, that grows louder the closer they get to the shore. Some have spotted a pale woman in white, standing motionless at the edge, her long hair dripping as though she had just emerged from the water. But she never speaks, she just stares at you. And then she vanishes. More disturbing are the stories from those who dared to swim. Several report being pulled downward by unseen hands. One man swore he saw faces in the lake bed staring up at him, mouths open, as if screaming, yet no sound escaped. Others say the water itself sometimes pulses like a heartbeat, and that if you place your hand just below the surface, you'll feel something reach back. Voices of the Old World. Angela Sidney, 1902 to 1991, born in CarCross to a Tagish mother and Tlingit father, was one of the last fluent speakers and storytellers of the Tagish language. Through her work with ethnographers and oral historians, she preserved a vast trove of First Nations stories, some uplifting, others terrifying. She believed stories were not only entertainment, but sacred teachings passed through generations. Angela warned of beings that walked between worlds. The Kushtaka, for example, a shape-shifting otter spirit said to lure people to their deaths with mimicry and charm. Or the Keel, a mountain-dwelling presence that feeds off those who disrespect the land. Some of her stories mention rocks that cry at night, or trails that change their shape to lead travelers astray. She once told of a man who ignored traditional offerings to the forest. He entered the woods and never came out. His sled returned days later, unmanned, the dogs whimpering and frost-covered, but the man was gone. They say on quiet nights, if you leave offerings of tobacco or berries on the trail near Montana Mountain, you can still hear faint drumming in the distance, and Angela's voice, softly retelling the story to those who listen. Though Angela Sidney has passed on, many believe she still walks through the spirit realm, protecting the old ways. Her voice woven into the wind, her warnings whispered through the pines. CarCross Desert, dunes of silence. Though only about 1 square mile in size, the CarCross Desert is known as the world's smallest desert. But it isn't truly a desert. It's a dried-up glacial lakebed made of fine silt and sand from ancient times. Once part of Lake Watson, the dunes were formed after the last ice age, sculpted by wind and time. But for the Tagish and Tlingit peoples, this place is not empty. It is a threshold between worlds. Locals whisper of spirits wandering the dunes, drawn to the wind and the silence. One legend tells of a trapper who crossed the sands at twilight and vanished. Days later, his tracks were found circling endlessly, leading nowhere. His voice is still heard on still nights, whispering through the breeze, calling for help, begging for a path home. Some visitors claim to see shapes standing motionless on the ridgelines, only to disappear as they draw closer. Others say the sand moves when it shouldn't, shifting in slow spirals around their feet. Some believe the desert is alive, a spirit itself, watching, listening, remembering. These are the haunted echoes of CarCross, where spirits live in lakes, hotels, and the very mountains. If you enjoyed the stories, give us a like, share the fear, and subscribe to Adorable Skull for more real horror rooted in true places. Until next time, sleep with one eye open.